If you don't bring your family to the gala, Clara, you can kiss the merger goodbye." The words landed like a sucker punch. Clara Vance froze at the head of the mahogany boardroom table, her fingers still curled around a crystal glass of water. The air in the room thickened. A dozen eyes, her board of directors, waited for her reaction, the fluorescent light glinting off their tailored suits and smug certainty. She took a slow breath, setting the glass down with the kind of precision that made people nervous. "They think they can corner me in my own boardroom." "What exactly are you implying, Lawrence?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. The chairman of the board leaned back, folding his hands. "The gala is about public image. You're the face of Vance Couture, Clara, and the public loves a success story with a human touch, family warmth, relatability. Our investors want to see stability." "Stability?" Clara arched an eyebrow. "You mean a man at my side and a child in the holiday card?" The room shifted. A few directors exchanged awkward glances. One cleared his throat. Lawrence didn't flinch. "This merger is worth over $200 million. The other party is very traditional. Show them you're settled and we close the deal. Show them you're still." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Living out of a penthouse with no roots, and they'll hesitate." Clara's manicured nails tapped once against the table. "So you're telling me that my numbers, my leadership, my 10 years of doubling revenue, none of that matters if I don't show up with a smiling spouse and a cherubic child?" "It matters," Lawrence said smoothly. "But optics matter more." Clara's jaw tightened. She had spent her life outrunning everyone's expectations, proving she didn't need anyone's approval. Now, apparently, she needed props. "Fine," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "You want optics? I'll give you optics." The board members shifted in their seats. Clara's dark eyes held them in place for a moment longer before she gathered her leather folder and strode toward the door. Her heels clicked like gunfire on the polished floor. In the elevator, she jabbed the button for the top floor where her private office overlooked half of downtown Boston. Her phone buzzed before the doors closed. "Mother." Clara hesitated, then swiped to answer. "I'm in the middle of preparing for the gala." Her mother's voice slid in as smooth as the champagne they'd be serving. "Darling, I heard there's some concern about you showing up alone." Clara pinched the bridge of her nose. "Of course you did. You know your father and I have always said yes, yes. Appearances, family image. I've got it covered." There was a pause. "You do?" Clara stared at her reflection in the elevator's mirrored wall. The high bun, the flawless suit, the sharp eyes that revealed nothing. "I will," she said before hanging up. By the time she reached her office, her assistant Marcy was already standing in the doorway with 2 lattes and an expression that suggested she'd been listening through the grapevine. "Tell me you have a plan," Marcy said, handing her a cup. "I have 48 hours," Clara replied, settling behind her desk. "Find me a family." Marcy blinked. "A what?" "A man, a child. Someone photogenic but not suspiciously perfect. We make them mine for one evening." Marcy's mouth opened-closed, then opened again. "Do you want to explain to HR why we're auditioning fake husbands? I don't care how you do it." "Just?" Clara stopped, a flicker of unease passing through her. She had never asked for help like this, never invited strangers into her personal orbit. But she could already hear the board's patronizing voices. She could already picture Lawrence smiling when the merger slipped through her fingers. "Find me someone," she finished. Later that afternoon, she left the elevator on the ground floor to find the lobby deserted, except for the rhythmic squeak of a mop. Daniel Hale was working the far end of the marble floor back, bent slightly, his Navy janitor's uniform pressed but faded at the elbows. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, the kind of pace that came from years of making things spotless while no one noticed. A small figure darted around him, chattering a mile a minute. The girl, 7, maybe 8, had a mass of light brown curls tied in a messy ponytail and was wearing a bright yellow raincoat despite the clear skies outside. She was holding a comic book in one hand and pointing animatedly at something on the page. Daniel glanced up, a faint smile curving his lips at whatever she'd said before answering in a voice too low for Clara to hear. The girl laughed, spinning in place. Clara's heels clicked against the marble, drawing their attention. Daniel straightened, eyes meeting hers. She noticed just for a second the tired warmth in his gaze, like someone who'd carried more than his share of weight but never complained about it. "Evening, Miss Vance," he said, giving a polite nod. The little girl tilted her head. "Are you the lady who owns the whole building?" Clara blinked, caught off guard. "Something like that." The girl studied her for a long moment, then asked with disarming sincerity, "Do you ever laugh, or do you just make important faces all day?" Daniel stifled a chuckle, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of worry at his daughter's boldness. Clara's lips twitched, just barely. "I'll have to get back to you on that." "Okay," the girl said cheerfully, skipping back to her comic. Clara started to walk away, but something in the exchange lingered, like the aftertaste of good coffee, unexpected and warming. She paused, glancing over her shoulder at Daniel and the girl. A man. A child. Someone who didn't belong to her world of press releases and mergers, but who for reasons she couldn't quite name felt oddly real. That night, Clara stared at the city skyline from her penthouse, the girl's question echoing in her head. "Do you ever laugh?" She exhaled sharply, grabbed her phone and scrolled to Marcy's number. "Forget the casting call," she said when Marcy answered groggily. "I think I've found them." The next morning, the first rays of sunlight slanted through the lobby's tall windows, spilling across the freshly polished marble. Daniel Hale was already there, kneeling by the baseboards with a cloth in one hand, his shoulders moving in a steady rhythm. Years of habit had tuned him to the quiet hours when the building belonged to the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft swish of a mop. A small, warm weight leaned against his side. "Daddy, you missed a spot," Isla announced, pointing to a smudge so faint it could have been her imagination. Her tone was pure authority. Daniel glanced down at her, amusement tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Are you the foreman now?" "I'm quality control," she said solemnly, holding her comic book like a clipboard. "If you want 5 stars, you gotta impress me." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. 5 stars, huh? Do I get a bonus?" "You get extra pancakes for breakfast tomorrow," she replied, then paused, grinning. "If you pass inspection." Daniel reached over and ruffled her curls, earning an exaggerated scowl. This was the life he understood. Quiet, unglamorous but solid, predictable, safe for her. They were heading toward the service elevator when the sharp click of heels echoed behind them. Daniel didn't have to turn to know who it was. "Mr. Hale," Clara's voice called smooth but carrying a subtle undercurrent of something. Urgency. He stopped, straightened, and turned. She was approaching with the same deliberate stride she used in the boardroom, black blazer silk blouse, every hair in place. The kind of woman who looked like she was always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel said evenly. Clara's gaze flicked to Isla, then back to him. "I need to speak with you, privately." Isla leaned around him, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Hi, Miss Clara." Clara softened barely. "Hello, Isla. How's quality control today?" "Busy," Isla said. "Daddy missed a spot. But don't worry, I fixed it." Daniel gave an apologetic shrug. "She's thorough." Clara's lips curved, but her eyes were all business. "Mr. Hale." 5 minutes. In the break room, Daniel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching Clara pace as though the small space couldn't contain her. "I'll get right to the point," she began. "I have an event this Saturday. A very important event. I need a family, temporarily." Daniel blinked, not sure he'd heard right. "A family, yes." She met his eyes without flinching. "The board, the press, certain investors, they want to see stability. A personal life. I don't have one. So I'm making one, for one night. And you want me to pose as my partner?" she finished. "And Isla would be—" "My daughter." He stared at her. The silence stretched heavy with the absurdity of it. Finally, he said, "You realize how crazy that sounds." "Perfectly," Clara replied. "But I don't have time to care about crazy. I have 48 hours and I need people I can trust to pull this off." Daniel's brows drew together. "Why me? You've got an army of PR people who could stage this with models." She hesitated, because they'd look like models, too perfect, too fake. "You don't." His mouth quirked. "That's supposed to be a compliment. It's supposed to be the truth," she said. "You're grounded, real, and Isla." Her voice caught the tiniest bit. "She's the kind of child people believe in." Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm not dragging my daughter into some corporate charade." "She wouldn't be in danger," Clara said quickly, "and I'd compensate you generously." "It's not about the money," he cut in, his voice firm. "It's about what's right for her." They both turned to the sound of a small gasp from the doorway. Isla stood there, eyes wide. "Wait, I'd get to wear a pretty dress." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Isla, and pretend to be your daughter?" she asked, Clara bouncing on her toes. Clara managed a smile. "That's the idea." Isla clasped her hands in front of her. "Daddy, please, just once. It could be fun, and you always say it's good to try new things." Daniel gave her a look. "I said try safe new things, like pancakes with blueberries. This is safe," she insisted. "It's just pretending, then softer." "And maybe Miss Clara needs help." Daniel glanced at Clara, who held his gaze without a word. For the first time since they'd met, she looked not unshakable, not untouchable. Just a woman asking for something she wasn't used to asking for. They ended up sitting at the small break room table, Isla swinging her legs as the grown-ups hammered out terms. "Fine," Daniel said at last. "I'll do it if we set ground rules. Isla doesn't get pushed into any photo she's not comfortable with. We keep the story simple. And you," he pointed at Clara, "you keep your boardroom politics away from her." "Agreed," Clara said without hesitation. "And one more thing," he added. "If she says she's done, we're done. No arguments." Clara inclined her head. "Done." Isla grinned. "This is going to be so much fun. Can I call you Mom?" Daniel choked on his coffee. Clara surprisingly didn't flinch. "We'll work on that." As they left the break room, Clara glanced at Daniel. "I'll send Marcy with details. We'll need to rehearse. Create a few shared memories for anyone who asks." "Rehearse?" Daniel asked. "Yes. We're not just going to walk in there cold. People can smell fake from a mile away." Isla tugged at her father's sleeve. "Don't worry, Daddy. I'll make sure you pass." Daniel smirked. Not sure if I should be comforted or terrified. Back in the lobby, Clara walked ahead, her mind already mapping out the next 48 hours. She didn't notice the faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She didn't notice how the building's marble halls suddenly felt a little less empty. Daniel watched her go, shaking his head. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" "Kiddo." Isla squeezed his hand. "An adventure." And somehow, against all logic, he couldn't quite bring himself to disagree. By the time Clara stepped into her penthouse that evening, the city lights were already glinting like scattered diamonds across the harbor. She kicked off her heels and walked straight to the wide glass windows. Normally, the skyline gave her a sense of control, an empire beneath her feet. But tonight, it felt more like a ticking clock. She couldn't shake the image of Isla leaning forward at the break room table, eyes wide with anticipation, or Daniel's steady, reluctant nod. For a woman who had built a life on careful, calculated moves, agreeing to this kind of chaos was a leap into the unknown. The next morning, Marcy appeared in Clara's office doorway, her expression somewhere between disbelief and curiosity. "You're really doing this," she said, setting a file on Clara's desk. "Your family dossier?" Clara arched a brow. "Family dossier." Marcy flipped it open. Inside was a photo of Daniel looking directly at the camera, as though he'd been caught mid-thought, and another of Isla grinning in her bright yellow raincoat. "I need their full names, some personal details, a few believable shared stories," Clara said, scanning the page. "If someone asks how we met, I don't want to be caught hesitating." "You mean, how you met the janitor who's now your fiancé," Marcy deadpanned. Clara didn't even look up. Exactly. 2 hours later, she was in the modest break room again. Daniel was at the counter pouring coffee into a paper cup. Isla was perched on a stool, legs swinging, sipping hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows bobbing on top. "You're early," Daniel said, glancing at the clock. "We have work to do," Clara replied, setting her leather folder on the table. "If we're going to convince a ballroom full of investors and press that we're a family, we need a history." Isla raised her hand. "Can I make up the story?" Daniel groaned. "That's not how this works, kiddo." Clara leaned forward. "Actually, Isla, you might be the key. People believe children, and you're very convincing." Isla beamed. "See, Daddy?" "She gets it." They spent the next hour sketching out their origin story. "Okay," Clara began, pen poised over a notepad. "How did we meet?" Laundry room Isla suggested. "You were lost and Daddy helped you figure out the machines." Daniel smirked. "That's believable, but you lost in public." Clara gave a wry smile. "Point taken." She crossed it out. "How about a community event, something with other witnesses?" Isla's eyes lit up. "The street fair last summer, Daddy helped you carry something heavy." "That could work," Daniel admitted. "We can say you'd just moved to the neighborhood, we bumped into each other, and I helped you carry a box." Clara wrote it down. "Perfect. We keep it simple. No unnecessary flourishes." Isla grinned mischievously. "Can I say, you two looked at each other like in the movies?" Daniel rolled his eyes. "No." "Yes," Clara said at the same time. Their eyes met, and for just a second Daniel thought he saw something softness in her expression. But then she blinked, and it was gone. "Next," Clara said briskly. "How long have we been together?" "A year," Daniel answered before she could. "Anything less will sound like a fling. A year says stability." Clara nodded slowly. Agreed. They moved on to favorite activities, baking, thanks to Isla evening walks and the occasional movie night. Isla insisted on including pillow forts in the list, to which Clara raised an eyebrow. "Pillow forts? You can't be a real family without one," Isla said matter-of-factly. Daniel chuckled. "She's not wrong." As the rehearsal went on, Clara found herself enjoying it. There was something grounding about sitting at a table with them, tossing ideas back and forth, Isla's laughter bubbling up at the silliest suggestions. It was unlike any boardroom meeting she'd ever attended, no power plays, no hidden agendas. Just connection. When they wrapped, Clara stood gathering her notes. "We'll meet again tomorrow evening. My place. We'll work on posture, how we'll enter the room, and—" She hesitated, glancing at Isla. "I suppose pillow forts." Isla clapped her hands. "Yes, I'll bring the marshmallows." Daniel shook his head, smiling despite himself. "You're creating a monster." That night, Daniel stood in the doorway of Isla's small bedroom, watching her arrange her stuffed animals in a neat row. "You're excited about this," he said quietly. "It's an adventure," she replied, tucking in a worn-out teddy bear. "Besides, Miss Clara seems lonely." Daniel leaned against the frame. "What makes you say that?" Isla shrugged. "She has a big smile, but she only uses it when she has to. Not like you do when you're happy." He thought about that long after he'd kissed her goodnight. Meanwhile, in her penthouse, Clara sat at her kitchen counter with a glass of wine, flipping through the pages of their family file. Every detail was tidy, believable. And yet, it was Isla's voice she kept hearing. "She seems lonely." Clara set down her glass and stared out at the city again. The skyline looked the same as always, but for the first time in years, she felt the faint stirrings of something unfamiliar. Anticipation. By Friday, their second rehearsal was set. Clara's apartment buzzed with a different kind of energy, less sterile, more alive. Isla darted from room to room, marveling at the floor-to-ceiling windows, while Daniel followed, hands in his pockets, taking everything in with quiet observation. "All right," Clara said, motioning for them to join her in the living room. "We practice walking in together, greeting people looking natural. No stiff smiles." Daniel gave her a half-smile. "You might need to define natural for me." "Just don't overthink it," she said. Look at Isla like she's the best thing in the room. That part shouldn't be hard." He glanced at his daughter, and the look in his eyes made Clara's chest tighten unexpectedly. They walked through the entrance scenario 3 times. The first was awkward, the second less so, and by the third, Clara realized she was actually smiling. Not the careful camera-ready curve she'd perfected for years, but something real. As they wrapped up, Isla threw herself onto the couch. "I think we're ready." Clara exchanged a look with Daniel. "We'll see." She picked up her folder, tucking it under her arm. "Tomorrow night we make them believe." Daniel nodded, but his voice was steady. "Or maybe we just show them who we are for one night, even if it's pretend." Clara didn't answer, but the thought stayed with her long after they left. Saturday morning broke crisp and clear, the kind of Boston winter day where the air carried the scent of snow, but the sun fought to keep its promise. Clara stood in the middle of her penthouse living room, a space usually so immaculate it could have been staged for a magazine shoot. Today, it looked different. A coffee table had been pushed against the wall. Cushions from her Italian leather couch lay scattered across the floor. A mixing bowl, a whisk, and an open bag of flour occupied her pristine marble counter. This was what happened when she let Daniel and Isla in. She heard them before she saw them. Isla's laughter ringing through the hall, Daniel's low murmur in reply. Then they appeared. Isla, wearing an apron twice her size, her curls dusted in flour like she'd just walked through a snowstorm. Daniel trailed behind, sleeves rolled up, holding a tray of unbaked cookies. "Quality control is here," Daniel announced with mock gravity. Isla hopped forward, lifting the tray so Clara could inspect it. "They're perfect," she declared, "because I made them. Daddy only helped a little." Clara arched an eyebrow, glancing at the uneven shapes. "They're unique." "They're home," Daniel said, simply setting the tray down. Something in the way he said it made her pause. She had never thought of cookies as home. Once the cookies were in the oven, Clara clapped her hands. "All right, time to rehearse. We've got 2 hours before the dress fitting." Isla scrambled to the couch. "What are we practicing first?" "Smiling, waving. Or the grand entrance where I spin around in my dress." "We're starting with the story," Clara said, sitting opposite her. "How we met, our first date, favorite things to do as a family. You'll need to answer questions naturally without looking at me for permission." "Easy," Isla said confidently. "We met at the street fair when Daddy helped you carry a heavy box." Clara nodded. "And our first date," Daniel smirked. "If we're going for believable maybe coffee at that corner cafe on Tremont. Not a 5-star restaurant." "That works," Clara agreed, jotting it down. "What did we talk about?" "Books," Isla blurted. "Daddy talked about fixing cars and you talked about designing dresses and then you both laughed because Daddy doesn't know what tulle is." Daniel grinned. "Still don't." Clara surprised herself by laughing, really laughing, and Isla's face lit up like she'd just scored a win. Next came the walking practice. Clara instructed, "We'll enter with me in the middle. Daniel, offer your arm. You're my partner. Isla, you'll hold my other hand. We walk slowly, like we belong there." They tried once. It was awkward. Daniel's long stride made Isla skip to keep up, and Clara's heels clicked too sharply. Again, Clara said. By the third attempt, they moved almost in sync. Daniel's arm was warm under Clara's hand, steady grounding. Isla swung her free arm, slightly humming under her breath. Clara realized she was smiling again, without meaning to. During a break, Clara fetched glasses of water. Daniel leaned against the counter watching Isla chase a dust mote in the sunlight. "You've got away with her," Clara said quietly. "She's my whole world," he replied without hesitation. "When you're raising a kid alone, you either learn patience or you lose them. I'm not about to lose her." Clara set the glasses down, her voice softer than she intended. "I wouldn't know what that feels like. My parents raised me with distance. Expectations instead of affection." Daniel studied her for a moment. "Maybe this isn't just rehearsal for you." She met his gaze, a flicker of something unguarded in her eyes. "Maybe not." The timer dinged and Isla dashed to the kitchen. Clara followed, half expecting disaster, but the cookies were golden and surprisingly intact. Isla arranged them on a plate with a flourish. First we eat, she announced. Then we build a pillow fort. Clara blinked. What? Pillow fort, Isla repeated, already pulling cushions from the couch. Daniel shot Clara a mock apologetic look. It's non-negotiable. 10 minutes later, Clara found herself inside a makeshift fortress of blankets and pillows, Isla wedged between them, holding a flashlight like they were telling ghost stories. This, Isla said solemnly, is what families do. Not just smile for cameras. They make forts and eat cookies inside. Clara glanced at Daniel over Isla's head. He was smiling that quiet, patient smile again, and for a moment the whole charade felt less like an act. When the afternoon sun began to fade, Clara helped Isla into her coat while Daniel gathered their things. Tomorrow's the real deal, she told them. Remember, calm, natural, confident. Isla grinned. We'll be perfect. Right. Daddy. Daniel chuckled. We'll be us. That's better than perfect. As they stepped into the elevator, Clara stood in the doorway watching the doors close. For years, she'd built walls around her life, keeping everything and everyone in their place. Now a janitor and his daughter had walked right through them. And somehow, she didn't mind at all. The lobby of the Marriott Grand shimmered under chandeliers the size of small cars, the air thick with the mingled scents of polished marble, expensive perfume, and expectation. Outside, limousines glided up to the entrance in an unbroken line, their passengers spilling out in tuxedos and sequined gowns. Clara stood near the revolving door. Her posture impeccable, her gown a deep emerald silk that hugged her figure and caught the light with every move. She was a master at this kind of stage, but tonight was different. Tonight she wasn't just Clara Vance, CEO of Vance Couture. Tonight she was part of a family. Beside her, Daniel adjusted the cuffs of his borrowed tuxedo. It fit well better than she expected, and yet he still looked like the man who fixed things with his hands and didn't mind a bit of dirt under his nails. Isla stood between them in a cream tulle dress with tiny satin shoes, her curls brushed but still rebelliously free. You look like a princess, Clara told her. Isla grinned. And you look like the queen. Daniel chuckled softly, then leaned toward Clara. Ready for this? She glanced up at him. No, but we're doing it anyway. They walked in together exactly as they'd practiced, Clara in the middle, Daniel offering his arm, Isla holding her other hand. Cameras flashed almost immediately, the staccato bursts of light like firecrackers. Clara. Over here. Who's your guest? Is that your fiancé? Clara kept her smile measured, nodding toward the reporters but never breaking stride. Daniel, for his part, seemed entirely unfazed, his gaze steady, protective every step matching hers. Inside the ballroom, the lighting was warm and golden, spilling over round tables set with white linens and crystal stemware. The hum of conversation swelled as they entered, heads turning, eyes narrowing in curiosity. Remember, Clara murmured under her breath. We've been together a year. Street fair, coffee shop, pillow forts. No improvising beyond that. Got it, Daniel replied. Though I still say the pillow fort story's going to raise questions. Isla piped up. Only from people who've never had fun. They were halfway through the mingling when the first test came. A silver-haired woman in a pearl choker swept up to them, her voice warm, but her eyes sharp. Clara, darling. And this must be... She extended a perfectly manicured hand toward Daniel. Daniel Hale, he said, shaking her hand firmly. Pleasure to meet you. And Isla, Clara added, resting a hand gently on the girl's shoulder. The woman crouched slightly, her smile softening. Aren't you just lovely? How old are you? 8, Isla said. But Daddy says I'm an old soul. The woman laughed. Well, I should say so. Clara felt the moment tilt in their favor, and then the woman's eyes flickered just for a second to Daniel's shoes. Perfectly shined, but not the kind that came from a luxury boutique. Later, as they made their way toward their table, a man in a navy suit intercepted them. Clara recognized him immediately. Vince Ralston, a reporter with a knack for digging where he wasn't invited. Clara, Vince said smoothly, you've been keeping secrets. Care to introduce your family to the public properly? Daniel's jaw tightened, but Clara stepped forward, her tone cool and even. This is Daniel, and this is Isla. That's all anyone needs to know tonight." Vince's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting. I could swear I've seen you before, Daniel. Somewhere less formal." Daniel's hand flexed at his side, but he didn't take the bait. "Must have been one of those faces," he said. Clara's fingers brushed against his, a small deliberate gesture before she guided them toward their table. The dinner passed in a blur of speeches, polite laughter, and the occasional clink of champagne glasses. Clara played her role flawlessly, but every so often she'd catch Daniel watching her, not the CEO, but her. Then came the charity auction. Clara hadn't planned for Isla to be on stage, but the host called for any young guests to help display the auction items. Isla's hand shot up before Clara could react. Minutes later, Isla was walking across the stage holding up a framed watercolor painting, smiling at the crowd like she'd been born to do it. When she returned to the table, breathless and proud, she leaned toward Clara. "Did I do okay?" Clara's throat tightened unexpectedly. "You were perfect." Daniel caught her eye, and for a moment there was an unspoken agreement between them. They were in this together now. But the night wasn't done testing them. As they stood near the exit waiting for coats, Clara overheard two guests whispering just a few feet away. "That's him, the janitor from her building. Impossible. Look at him in that tux. I'm telling you, I've seen him mopping floors." The words were meant to be hushed, but in the acoustics of the marble foyer they carried. Daniel's shoulders tensed. Clara's pulse spiked. She turned, locking eyes with the two men. "Is there something you'd like to say to me directly?" They faltered under her gaze, muttering something about misunderstanding before slipping away. Daniel exhaled slowly, but his voice was quiet when he spoke. "You don't have to fight my battles." Clara's reply was immediate. "I'm not fighting yours, I'm fighting ours." Outside, the cold air bit at their cheeks as the valet brought the car around. Isla climbed into the back seat, chattering about the dessert table. Daniel hesitated before getting in. "You know, this won't stop here. Someone's going to dig. They'll find out who I am." Clara met his gaze, her voice firm. "Then we'll handle it. Together." For the first time all night, Daniel's guarded expression softened. "Careful, Clara. You almost sound like you mean that." She smiled faintly, settling into her seat. "Maybe I do." The city lights blurred past the windows as they drove away the night, leaving them with more questions than answers, and an unspoken understanding that, whatever this was, it was no longer just pretend. The first sign came the very next morning. Clara was halfway through her espresso when Marcy stepped into her office, phone in hand, her face tight. "It's starting," she said. Clara set the cup down slowly. "What's starting?" Marcy placed the phone on the desk and hit play. A grainy cell phone video filled the screen. Last night's gala foyer, Clara and Daniel waiting for the valet. In the background, the two men's voices rang clearer than she remembered. "That's him, the janitor from her building. Impossible. Look at him in that tux. I'm telling you, I've seen him mopping floors." The clip ended with Clara turning sharply toward them. The camera caught her glare and Daniel's clenched jaw before cutting off. Beneath the video, the caption read, "CEO's mystery date from mop to merger." By noon, 3 gossip blogs had reposted it. By 2 o'clock, business news sites had picked it up, turning it into a human interest headline with a sneer hidden between the lines. At 3:15, her phone lit up with Lawrence's name. "Clara," he said without greeting. "I assume you've seen the coverage." "I have. This merger is fragile enough without you inviting a PR circus. You need to control the narrative." Her voice cooled. Meaning you either make it clear this was a publicity stunt, or you step back from public appearances until the noise dies down. Investors don't like uncertainty." Clara's fingers curled on the desk. "What they like or don't like isn't going to dictate my personal life. Everything you do is the company's life," Lawrence snapped. "Don't forget that." She hung up without a goodbye. Downstairs, Daniel was pushing his mop bucket into the service hallway when he heard the voice. "Hey, Hale," one of the younger maintenance guys called. "Didn't know you were dating royalty." Daniel kept moving, but the man chuckled. "Better watch yourself. People like her don't stick around for the janitor. Not unless they need a good photo." Daniel parked the mop, turning slowly. You done? The man lifted his hands in mock surrender. Just saying. Don't get too comfortable. Daniel walked away without replying, but the words followed him all the way to the next floor. That evening, Clara found herself outside the service exit, the cold air stinging her cheeks. Daniel emerged a moment later, carrying his jacket over one arm. "You've seen it?" she asked. Hard to miss. His voice was even, but there was a distance to it. "They're twisting the story." He met her gaze. "It's not a story to me. It's my life, my job, my kid. I know. Do you?" He stepped closer. "Because for you, this is about headlines. For me, it's about whether the parents at Isla's school look at her differently, whether the people I work with think I'm chasing something I'm not." She held his eyes, fighting the instinct to argue. "Daniel, I didn't bring you into this to humiliate you." He exhaled a slow, weary breath. "Maybe not. But you did bring us into it without knowing what it might cost." The silence stretched between them until the door behind Daniel banged open. Isla peeked out her curls, peeking from under a knitted beanie. "Hi, Miss Clara," she said brightly, then caught the tension in the air. Did I interrupt?" Clara forced a smile. "Not at all. How was your day? Daddy picked me up early," she said proudly. "We made grilled cheese." Daniel touched her shoulder. "Come on, kiddo. Let's get home." They walked away together, and Clara watched them go, a hollowness settling in her chest. For the first time, she wondered if she'd built a situation that could collapse faster than she could repair it. 2 days later, the whispers had hardened into headlines. From boardroom to broom closet, one tabloid jeered. Another ran a side-by-side photo Daniel at the gala. Daniel in uniform with the caption, "Which is the real Mr. Vance?" Marcy stormed into Clara's office. "We can spin this," she said. "Talk about you connecting with real people. Make it an inspirational angle." Clara shook her head. "That turns him into a prop again. I'm not doing that." Marcy hesitated. "Then you need to talk to him before this does permanent damage." That night, Clara went to the garage where Daniel sometimes worked after hours repairing neighbors' cars for extra cash. She found him under the hood of a rusted pickup, sleeves rolled up, grease streaking his forearms. He didn't look up. "If you're here to check on your investment, you're in the wrong place." "I'm here because I owe you an apology," she said. That made him straighten rag in hand. "For what? For not thinking far enough ahead. For assuming I could control how people saw you. For not realizing how much this could hurt you and Isla." He studied her for a long moment. "You can't control what people say, Clara. You can only decide what's worth standing in front of." She stepped closer. "Oh, and you. Are you willing to stand in front of this with me?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not if it means Isla gets caught in the crossfire." From the corner, a small voice spoke up. "Crossfire means fighting, right?" They both turned to see Isla, curled up on an old couch sketchbook in her lap. "I don't like fighting," she added softly. Clara crouched beside her. "Neither do I." Isla tilted her head. "Then maybe we just be a family in places where people can't ruin it, like the kitchen, or the park, or pillow forts." Daniel met Clara's eyes over Isla's head, and for once there was no anger there, only a tired kind of truth. When Clara left the garage that night, the cold wind cut through her coat, but something else lodged deeper. The realization that this was no longer about a gala, a merger, or optics. If she wanted to keep Daniel and Isla in her life, she couldn't just protect the image of them. She had to protect them, even if it meant stepping out from behind the armor she'd worn her whole life. The first week without seeing them was like walking through a silent house with all the lights off. Clara's days were full meetings, calls, investor updates, but everything felt oddly two-dimensional, as if the world had lost some unseen depth. She told herself it was for the best, that giving Daniel and Isla space would let the gossip die down, that staying away was a kindness. But at night, the skyline outside her penthouse window felt less like an empire and more like a wall. Daniel, meanwhile, threw himself into routine. He picked up extra shifts, fixed 2 cars in the evenings, and let Isla convince him to make pancakes for dinner twice in 1 week. He didn't mention Clara, and Isla didn't ask. But sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, she'd set an extra place at the table, then quietly put it away before they ate. It was Thursday when Clara finally heard her mother's voice on the phone again. "You've gone quiet, darling," her mother said. "Too quiet. I've been busy," Clara replied, staring at the glass of water on her desk. "With work or with licking your wounds?" Clara's lips tightened. "If this is about the press—" "It's about you," her mother cut in. "You've spent your whole life curating distance. And now, the first time you let someone in, you let them slip out the door without even trying to hold on." Clara swallowed. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy," her mother said, "but it's worth it." The next morning, Clara found herself walking into the small coffee shop on Tremont, the one they'd picked for their origin story. She ordered a cappuccino and took the corner table. It felt absurd, sitting there alone, pretending she hadn't half hoped they might walk in. By the time she left, she knew two things. One, the coffee was still excellent. And two, she couldn't keep doing this half-life of almosts. That evening, Daniel was closing up the garage when his phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara. "I don't want space if it means losing you. Can we talk?" He stared at it for a long moment before typing back. "Talking isn't the hard part. Listening is." She replied almost instantly. "Then let's try both." The next day she came to the building just before his shift ended. He was wiping down the mop handles in the supply room, and for a moment she simply watched him. Sleeves rolled up, hair falling slightly into his eyes, moving with the unhurried precision of someone who did things right the first time. "You clean like it matters," she said quietly. He looked up. "It does matter." She stepped inside. "So does this." Daniel leaned against the counter, arms folded. "If you're here to talk, say it plain." Clara took a breath. "I was wrong. I thought if I kept you close but under control, I could keep you safe from all of this, but that's just another way of keeping distance. And distance is what you're good at," he said not unkindly. "Yes," she admitted, "but I don't want to be good at it anymore." From the hallway came the faint sound of sneakers on tile. Isla appeared in the doorway, her backpack bouncing against her side. "Hi, Miss Clara," she said, surprised but smiling. "Hi, Isla?" Clara hesitated, then crouched so she was eye level. "I've missed you." Isla studied her face for a moment as if deciding whether to believe her. Then she said simply, "We still have marshmallows in the cupboard." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Marshmallows? For pillow forts," Isla said, as though it were obvious. They ended up back at Daniel's small apartment that evening. It wasn't planned, but somehow Clara was sitting cross-legged on the floor while Isla lined up blankets and cushions like a military operation. Daniel was in the kitchen making cocoa. "You're really coming back?" Isla asked without looking up. "If you'll have me," Clara said. Isla grinned. "You were good at the smiling part. We just need to work on the laughing." Clara laughed then a real one, and Isla beamed like she'd just won a prize. Later, after Isla had fallen asleep in the fort, Daniel walked Clara to the door. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked quietly. "No," she said honestly. "But I'd rather be unready with you than ready without you." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll see where it goes." She smiled faintly. "As long as it's forward." When Clara stepped out into the cool night, she realized something had shifted. The distance between them hadn't vanished, it had turned into a path. And for the first time in weeks, she wanted to follow it. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, but the sidewalk still glistened in the morning light. Clara stood outside Daniel's apartment building holding 2 paper cups from the cafe on Tremont. 1 cappuccino, 1 hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. She wasn't entirely sure why she'd come unannounced, but the idea of starting the day without seeing them felt suddenly wrong. Daniel opened the door still in a worn gray t-shirt, his hair slightly mussed. He eyed the cups in her hands. "You bribing us with sugar now?" Clara smirked. "I'm learning from the best." She glanced toward the living room where Isla was sitting cross-legged on the floor building a tower out of mismatched blocks. When Isla saw her, she lit up. "Miss Clara." "You're here." Clara stepped inside and handed her the hot chocolate. "Figured you could use an architect's fuel." Isla took a sip, chocolate mustache already forming. This is the good kind." They spent the morning lazily, Daniel fixing a loose drawer handle in the kitchen, Clara helping Isla build a city from the block set. It was ordinary, comfortable, and it scared Clara how much she wanted more of it. When Daniel finally sat down wiping his hands on a dish towel, Clara looked at both of them. "I was thinking, we could do something together this weekend, the three of us." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Like what? There's a winter fair upstate," Clara said. "Ice sculptures, hot cider fireworks in the evening. I used to want to go when I was a kid, but—" She trailed off, not finishing the sentence. "But your parents were busy," Daniel guessed quietly. She met his gaze, surprised. "Yes." Isla bounced in her seat. "Can we go, Daddy?" "Please, I've never seen ice sculptures." Daniel hesitated, looking between his daughter and Clara. "It's a long drive." "I'll handle the driving," Clara said quickly, "and the hotel, and anything else we need." Daniel's voice was steady. "It's not about the cost. It's about what it means." Before Clara could respond, Isla spoke, her voice soft but clear. "It means we're together, that's all." The words landed like a quiet truth neither adult could dodge. Daniel's shoulders eased and Clara felt something loosen in her chest. "All right," Daniel said finally. "We'll go." Isla clapped her hands. "Yes, I'm bringing my snow boots and the big scarf Grandma made." Clara smiled, feeling the first flicker of real anticipation in weeks. Saturday morning the sky was pale and bright, promising cold but fair weather. Clara picked them up in her SUV, the back seat already stocked with blankets and snacks. Isla climbed in, chattering about all the things she wanted to see: the ice castle, the giant snowflake, and maybe a pony, if they have one. Daniel buckled her in, then slid into the passenger seat. "You really packed half a kitchen in here?" he said, eyeing the cooler. "I like to be prepared," Clara replied. "For what? For anything." The drive was long but easy. Daniel told stories about Isla's first snow day, about the time she tried to help shovel the driveway and ended up building a snow fort instead. Clara shared her own rarer memories, the year she'd begged for a sled and got a silver music box instead, her parents calling it more refined. Isla, sandwiched between them in conversation, asked questions that made them laugh and pause in equal measure. "Miss Clara, do you have a favorite smell?" Clara thought for a moment. "Fresh-baked bread." Daniel smirked. "Funny, I'd have guessed new leather." Maybe both, Clara admitted. By the time they reached the fairgrounds, the world was dusted in white, the air crisp enough to turn every breath into a puff of smoke. Strings of lights crisscrossed above stalls selling hot cider caramel apples and roasted nuts. Music drifted from a small stage where a folk band played their notes, carried on the wind. Isla ran ahead to a row of ice sculptures. A dragon, a mermaid, a pair of swans with necks curved into a heart. She pressed her gloved hands to the ice. "It's so smooth." Clara watched her, then glanced at Daniel. "She's magic." Daniel's gaze stayed on his daughter. "Yeah, she is." They wandered the fair together, Isla dragging them from one display to another, Daniel making sure she didn't slip. Clara laughing more than she realized. At one point, Isla insisted they all take a picture in front of the ice castle. "Come on, Daddy. You stand here and Miss Clara, you stand next to him. Closer. You're supposed to look like you like each other." Daniel's mouth twitched, but he didn't move away. Clara stepped closer, their shoulders brushing. For the briefest moment the cold faded, replaced by a warmth she couldn't quite name. As dusk fell, the fair transformed. Lanterns glowed against the snow, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke. They found a spot near the main square, cups of cider warming their hands as the first fireworks burst overhead in red and gold. Isla gasped, eyes wide. "It's like the sky is happy." Clara glanced at her, then at Daniel. His profile was lit by the flicker of the fireworks, and for a heartbeat she imagined this wasn't temporary, that they weren't pretending. When he turned to look at her, there was something unspoken in his eyes, not an answer but a question. And for once, she didn't feel the need to control it. That night, in the quiet of the hotel room, Clara watched Isla fall asleep curled between them, her small hand resting against Daniel's arm. Daniel shifted slightly, careful not to wake her. "You know, this doesn't make everything simple," he said softly. "I know," Clara replied. "But maybe it makes it worth figuring out." He didn't answer, but the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips. When Clara closed her eyes, she realized Isla had been right all along. It wasn't about where they were or what they were doing. It was about being together, and that was enough to start. The fair was at its most alive that evening. Lanterns flickered along snowy paths, laughter drifted from the carousel, and the air was thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts. Clara walked between Daniel and Isla, their footsteps crunching softly in the snow. Isla had a caramel apple in one hand, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Can we go see the ice maze before the fireworks start?" she asked, her voice bright with hope. Daniel glanced at Clara. "We've got 20 minutes. Clara smiled. "Lead the way, Princess Quality Control." The maze was larger than Clara expected, its crystalline walls glowing faintly under embedded LED lights. Children's voices echoed from inside, mixed with the occasional adult calling for their kids. Isla darted ahead, following the twists and turns, her giggle trailing behind her like a ribbon. "Stay, where we can see you," Daniel called. "I will," she called back, her voice already around the next corner. Clara quickened her pace, but the next turn revealed only strangers. A flicker of unease tightened in her chest. Isla Daniel's tone was sharper now. He turned left, Clara went right. The maze split into 3 narrow corridors, each lined with icy walls too tall to see over. They searched for what felt like forever, calling her name, moving faster with each step. The crowd noise outside seemed muted, replaced by the hollow echo of their voices. Then Clara reached a dead end. No Isla. She spun back toward the main path, her heart hammering. Daniel's voice came from somewhere ahead, strained. "She's not answering. She wouldn't just—" Clara stopped herself, shaking her head. "She knows better. Kids don't get lost because they want to," Daniel said, already moving again. They emerged from the maze into the main square, scanning the crowd. No caramel apple, no yellow scarf. Clara's breath came too fast, too shallow. "We need to tell security." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight, and took off toward the information booth. Clara followed the fear building in her chest like a vice. When they reached the booth, Daniel gave a rapid description. 8 years old, curly brown hair, cream coat, yellow. Scarf, brown boots, name's Isla Hale. The attendant picked up a radio. "Copy. All stations be on the lookout." Minutes dragged. Daniel paced, running a hand over his mouth. "I should have kept her closer. I should have—" "Stop." Clara cut in, her voice low but firm. "We're finding her. That's all that matters right now." He looked at her, then something raw in his eyes. "If anything happens to her—" "Nothing is going to happen," she said, though her own chest felt like it might cave in. She scanned the square again, then her eyes fell on the main stage where a man was introducing the next musical act. A microphone. "Daniel," she said quickly, "the stage." He caught on instantly, and within moments they were climbing the steps. The stage manager looked ready to object until Clara handed him her business card and said, 2 minutes. Daniel took the mic, his voice steady but loud enough to cut through the crowd noise. "My name's Daniel Hale. My daughter Isla is missing. She's wearing a yellow scarf cream coat. If you see her, please bring her here." "Isla," his voice caught for a fraction of a second. "If you can hear me, stay where you are. We'll come to you." Clara stepped to the mic. "Sweetheart, it's Clara. I'm here too. We're not leaving until we find you." For a moment the crowd noise dimmed, the music gone. Then, faintly, a child's voice carried from the left side of the square. Daddy Daniel's head whipped around. She was there just beyond a row of market stalls, her eyes wide but dry. In an instant, Daniel was off the stage, weaving through the crowd. Clara followed her heels, slipping slightly on the icy ground. When they reached her, Isla threw her arms around Daniel's neck. "I couldn't find you. I tried to go back, but the ice walls." Daniel held her tighter, his face buried in her hair. "You're okay. You're safe. That's all that matters." Clara crouched beside them. "You scared us, you know." Isla sniffled. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Clara smiled gently. "I know. Let's just stick together from now on." They walked back toward the square, Daniel carrying Isla despite her protests that she could walk. Clara stayed close, her hand brushing the girl's arm every few steps as if to reassure herself she was still there. By the time the fireworks began, they were standing side by side in the crowd, Isla nestled between them, her gloved hands in both of theirs. The sky lit up in bursts of gold and red, and Daniel looked down at Clara. "Thank you for being there." She met his gaze. Always. For the first time she realized she meant it. That night, back at the hotel, Isla fell asleep quickly worn out from the day's excitement. Daniel stood at the window, watching snowflakes drift under the streetlights. Clara joined him, her voice quiet. "You kept her safe today," he shook his head. "We kept her safe." They stood there for a long moment, the silence between them no longer cold, but something closer to peace. The Monday after the winter fair felt different. Clara arrived at Vance Couture's headquarters earlier than usual, her heels echoing in the still hallway. She had made her decision sometime between the fireworks and watching Isla sleep in the hotel room. It had been crystal clear, then hiding was no longer an option. Her assistant, Marcy, was already waiting with a stack of newspapers and her laptop open to a dozen tabs. "It's everywhere," Marcy said grimly. "The fair, pictures, the stage announcement, even a video of you holding Isla's hand while you two walked out. Headlines are all over the place, half are heartwarming, half are not." Clara skimmed one front page. From CEO to stepmom, the story behind the mystery man. Another read, "Is Vance Couture losing its edge or finding its heart?" Marcy lowered her voice. "The board called an emergency meeting. They're expecting you to walk in there and either distance yourself from Daniel or, well, you know." "I know," Clara said, sliding the papers aside, "but I'm not going to distance myself." Marcy blinked. "You're going to—" "I'm going to tell the truth," Clara interrupted. "About Daniel, about Isla, about what they mean to me." By the time she entered the boardroom, every seat was filled. Lawrence sat at the head of the table, expression carved from stone. The murmurs died as Clara took her place. Clara Lawrence began. "I trust you've seen the media coverage. The optics are optics." Clara repeated the word sharp. "That's what we keep coming back to, isn't it? Not the truth, not the people behind the headlines. Just how it looks." One of the directors leaned forward. "You're aware that public perception affects our valuation." "Yes," Clara cut in. "And I'm also aware that we've built this company on the promise of authenticity, of representing the people who buy from us, wear our designs, believe in our brand. And right now, those people are watching to see if I live by that or hide behind a press release." Lawrence's voice was cool. "And what exactly do you intend to tell them?" Clara stood. "Everything." That afternoon the press conference was called. Cameras lined the front row, their lenses trained on the podium. Clara stepped up the city skyline behind her through the glass wall. She didn't use the prepared statement Marcy had drafted. "I know many of you have questions about the man and the young girl who've been seen with me recently." She began, her voice steady. "His name is Daniel Hale. He's a janitor in the building where Vance Couture has its headquarters. The young girl is Isla, his daughter, and they are not part of some marketing stunt. They are part of my life." A murmur rippled through the room, but Clara didn't pause. "I met them by chance. And what started as something temporary became something real. Daniel is one of the most grounded, decent people I've ever known. Isla is sunshine in human form. They've reminded me that there's more to life than deals and deadlines. That home isn't about a penthouse or a press profile, it's about who's sitting across from you at the dinner table." A reporter raised his hand. "Ms. Vance, are you concerned about the impact this could have on the company's image?" Clara met his gaze. "I'm more concerned about the impact it would have on me if I let other people's prejudice decide who I keep in my life. Across town, Daniel was in the break room when the press conference streamed live on the small wall-mounted TV. A few co-workers turned to watch him, their expressions unreadable. On screen, Clara continued, "If this company stands for anything, it should stand for valuing people for who they are, not the job title on their name badge. That's what I stand for." Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the screen, the rag in his hands forgotten. When it ended, one of the older custodians clapped him on the shoulder. "She's got guts, that one." Daniel managed a faint smile. "Yeah, she does." That evening, Clara's phone buzzed with a single text from Daniel. "We need to talk. My place." When she arrived, Isla was sprawled on the couch, coloring, humming softly. Daniel was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did." He studied her. "You just put yourself in the crosshairs for me, for us." Clara stepped closer. "I didn't do it for optics. I didn't do it for the board. I did it because I'm done pretending this isn't real." His eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, then maybe it's time I stop pretending too." From the couch, Isla's voice floated over. "Does this mean we're having cocoa tonight?" Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, kiddo. Cocoa for everyone." As Clara sat at their small kitchen table, steam curling from her mug, she realized something she'd never felt at a gala or in a boardroom. She was exactly where she wanted to be. And for once, she didn't care who was watching. Snow had begun to fall by the time Clara left the office that Friday evening, the city wrapped in a soft white hush. For once, she wasn't heading home to her penthouse and the ever-present hum of emails. She was driving toward a small apartment on the other side of town, an apartment where the lights in the window made her think of warmth, laughter, and cocoa with too many marshmallows. When Daniel opened the door, the smell of something baking drifted out. "You're just in time," he said. "Isla's on a mission." From the kitchen came Isla's voice. "No peeking until the cookies are ready." Clara stepped inside, shaking snow from her coat. "I wouldn't dare ruin a mission." 15 minutes later, they were all at the table, the three of them, a plate of cookies still warm in the center. Isla, beaming, pushed the plate toward Clara. "Taste test. You're the judge." Clara took a bite and smiled. "Perfect." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Better than last time?" She nodded. "Better than anything I've had in years." For a moment, the only sound was Isla's giggle and the soft patter of snow against the window. It felt easy. When the cookies were half gone, Isla hopped down from her chair. "Be right back," she announced and disappeared into her room. Daniel leaned back, his eyes on Clara. "She's been talking about you a lot." Clara's lips curved. "Good things, I hope." He hesitated, then said, "She said you make the world feel bigger, and that you make me smile more." Something warm and sharp twisted in her chest. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time." Daniel's gaze held hers. "Clara, this started as something neither of us planned, but somewhere along the way it stopped being pretend." She swallowed her voice, quiet. "I know, and I don't want it to end." Isla reappeared, holding something behind her back. She grinned at them both. "Okay, close your eyes." They obeyed, and a moment later she set something on the table between them. "Open." It was a photo frame inside a picture from the winter fair, the three of them in front of the ice castle. Daniel's arm was around Clara, and Isla's smile was wide enough to light the scene. "I printed it at school," Isla said proudly, "because families should have pictures." Clara felt her throat tighten. "It's beautiful, Isla." Daniel reached over, resting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You did good, kiddo." Later, after Isla had gone to bed, Clara and Daniel stood by the window watching the snow swirl under the streetlights. "You know," he said quietly a year ago, "if someone told me I'd be here with you, I'd have laughed." "And now?" Clara asked. He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Now, I'm just grateful I didn't miss it." She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "Me too." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was full, the kind that only comes when there's nothing left to prove. The next morning they bundled up and walked to the Park Isla between them, holding both their hands. The world was bright and clean, the snow crunching beneath their boots. At the playground, Isla ran ahead to the swings, calling for them to hurry. Daniel smiled. She's got a way of making you follow her lead. Clara laughed softly. Maybe that's what families do. They follow each other even when they're not sure where they're going. He looked at her, something deep and certain in his eyes. As long as we go together. That evening, back at Daniel's apartment, they sat on the couch with Isla curled up between them, watching the fire and the small electric heater flicker. Clara glanced around the mismatched furniture, the faint smell of cookies still in the air, the photo frame on the shelf, and realized she didn't miss the penthouse at all. She leaned back, letting the moment settle into her bones. So, are we a family now? Isla didn't even hesitate. We always were. You just had to notice. Clara laughed, but her eyes shimmered. Then I guess I finally did. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the city in quiet. Inside, in that small apartment, 3 people sat close, the glow of something rare and certain holding them together. It wasn't the life Clara had planned. It was better. And for the first time in years, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. Sometimes, life doesn't give us the family we expect. It gives us the one we never saw coming. Maybe it starts with a chance encounter in a hallway, a cup of hot chocolate, or a little girl's fearless smile. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to change everything. So, dear friends, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Share your thoughts, your favorite moments, or the times in your life when love and kindness surprised you. And if this story touched your heart, remember to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Your support helps us keep telling stories that bring hope, warmth, and a little more light into the world. From all of us here, thank you for spending this time with me. Until we meet again in the next story, stay safe, stay kind, and never stop believing in the magic of connection.